Check the description for the following discount codes. Well, my review of the Fanatec DD1 direct drive wheelbase. And yes, to the person that commented last time, it is pronounced Fanatec and not Fanatec. If you whiz over to the Fanatec YouTube channel, you will see they introduce themselves as Fanatec and not Fanatec. Fanatec sounds like a cheap brand of children's toys, or perhaps a line of women's sanitary products. It is most definitely pronounced Fanatec. At least that's how Fanatec pronounce their name, and I'm pretty confident they probably know how to pronounce their own name. Anyway, is this any good? Should you buy it? Let's cut straight to the chase. Yes, it is excellent. Yes, if you're in the market for a direct drive wheel, I can definitely recommend the Fanatec DD1. If it's in your price bracket, if you want it because it matches your pedals and your shifter like I did, and because you don't want wires hanging from the back of your wheel that plug into your wheelbase like a lot of the other direct drive wheelbases do, these are all the reasons I bought it. If you want it because it's not the cheapest but not the most expensive, it's somewhere in the middle, and because perhaps you like the way it looks and you like the little screen on the front and the overall presentation, then yes, absolutely go ahead and buy one. There is actually now an affiliated link in the description from the guys at digitalmotorsport.com, where I bought this from, because they'd received some communication from some of you guys that had mentioned I'd recommended them in my first impressions video, and they were really happy that I'd done that, and they said, Carl, would you like an affiliate account? I said, yes, I would. Sadly, there's no discount though, unfortunately. They are just middlemen, so their percentages, their margins are quite small. And the affiliate commission I get is super small. I think it is literally 1%. So that's like £1 for every £100 you might spend. But every little helps, as Tesco's would say. And if you're in the UK and perhaps even other parts of Europe, if you want to use digitalmotorsports.com, I do recommend them. Their communication was good, their service was good. I ordered this on a Saturday afternoon and it arrived the Monday morning. So that's literally like next working day, because Sunday isn't a working day, or it's Saturday's not even really a working day. So yeah, that's all good. Definitely, if you want one, by all means, go buy one. And those are the reasons I really opted for this. I like the way it looked. I liked its presentation. You know, I like the Fanatec writing on the side, the little screen. I like the colour scheme, this sort of brassy, goldy colours on the collar there, and it matched my V3s and my H-pattern shifter as well. You know, I wanted to save USB ports was another thing, by being able to plug the wheels and the pedals and the shifter into this. There was a little bit of a ball ache with that actually, which I'll talk about in a minute. In fact, no, I'll talk about it now. So on the back of this, it's bloody heavy as well. You see all your different sockets. You can see the little torque key in there as well that enables high torque mode. I see no reason why that even exists, to be honest. If you're buying a direct drive wheel, you're buying it because it has lots of torque, so I don't know why they've got that. It's an interesting feature. You take it out to protect, I don't know, kids maybe, or something like that, but for us grown-ups that are buying direct drive wheelbases, we want the torque that's all available. Anyway, yeah, my shifter, some of you may or may not know, because if you've got one of these Fanatec shifters, they can suffer with electromagnetic interference on the Hall sensors, the Hall effect sensors, and it will start mis-shifting. You'll put it in third and it will go into first. You'll put it in first and it will go into reverse, and weird things like this. Some people experience it if they use USB hubs rather than plugging the shifter straight into their PC. Well, I experienced that plugging the shifter into this, which was a little bit annoying because I bought this to save myself USB ports, amongst other things, the other things I just mentioned. There's nothing I could do about it. It would just occasionally, but reliably, go into the wrong gear. In fact, my Mrs. Katie was playing, and she's like, I'm like, why, how are you putting it into reverse? Because to put the Fanatec shifter in reverse, you have to push it down and push it across. And she's like, I don't know, Carl. And when I watched her, she wasn't putting it into reverse. She was going into first, but the shifter was registering a reverse input. So I soon twigged that it's because it was now plugged into this rather than its own USB socket on the computer via an extension cable. So I probably unplugged it from this, plugged it straight back into the PC, and all is well. But that's something for you guys to note. If you're buying this, and one of the reasons is you want to plug your shifter and your pedals into it, depending on your exact setup, because even what rig you've got can affect EMI. Even the frequency of the power in your country, 50 hertz, 60 hertz, this all contributes to EMI. Where your PC is, you know, what pedals you're using, how close your screen is, and it all contributes to this. Even the USB cable that you use, some are shielded, some are not. So yeah, for me, I couldn't use a shifter plugged into this. It would just put it in the wrong gears quite regularly, which obviously is no use, is it? But you know, I unplugged it, put it back into its USB cable, and it worked just fine. So I don't think it's not a problem with the base, the wheelbase. It's a problem with the shifter, because as I say, some people who use them just for USB hubs have this same issue, and they have to give it a dedicated cable. So not an issue with the DD1, but something you need to know about if part of your plan, like mine, was to save yourself another USB port. You're probably not going to be able to. Yeah, what else? Right, so basically everything about this is good. I only have two gripes. One gripe is that the power button is phenomenally small. It's this little round dot you see there, and it's almost flush with this sort of X pattern across the back there. And when it's bolted down to your rig, and you're trying to reach around from behind, as we do from time to time, to press the button. In fact, no, I don't do that. That's just weird. You have to press the button. It's quite hard. You find yourself sort of fumbling around, sliding your hand on the back of the DD1 until you go, oh yeah, there it is, and then you turn it on. And it's only a soft switch as well, so it's not like it clicks on or off. You know, a rocker switch would have been perhaps a little easier to operate, rather than this little soft switch that they've used. So that's really my only gripe with this, aside from the shifter, you know, not being able to plug in and use. But again, it isn't the problem with this, it's the problem with the bloody shifter. Build quality is good, the fit and finish is good, I love the way it looks. Came really well packaged. In fact, it came in a really nice box. I'd show it to you, but it's in the loft. Had two locks, plastic locks side by side in this cardboard box that you had to slide before you could lift the top off. And it was all really nicely presented in there as well. So that was nice. The power supply, should you be interested in what that looks like, it's just this big rectangular piece of plastic here with this plug on the end that goes into the back of the wheelbase, and then just your normal sort of power supply 3-pin on that side. What else did we get? I think it came with a USB cable, obviously that's still over there on my rig, and it came with an RJ12 cable for connecting your V3 pedals into the back of this as well. I've just realised I'm sitting this on the table and all the weight is going on that little torque key that's poking out the back. Probably shouldn't do that, but it's a bit late now and I quite like having it in view, so we're going to leave it. Hope it doesn't break. Shouldn't be there anyway, should it? Anyway, because the other thing you have to do, well, because I've not got any buttons on my steering wheel, not only do you have the torque key in, when you first power it up after fiddling around to find your power button, you have to turn the wheel at 90 degrees for a few seconds. You see this little progress bar go up on the screen to enable high torque mode. It's like they really don't want you to use high torque mode. It's like you've got to put a key in, then you've got to do this, and before you do all that, you've got to fumble around and try and find a tiny little power button. So the power button's a little gripe, and the shifter is a little bit of a gripe. Other than that, I have no complaints about anything. It bolted straight on to my GT Mega Prime using the bolt holes on the bottom there. I have got a different wheel deck coming where it bolts on from the side, so we'll try that out as well, see if there's a difference between the two. Yeah, that bolted on without any problems at all. Everything plugged in without any issues. Computer recognised that I already had the Fanatec drivers installed. I did a firmware update, which obviously worked just fine, and yeah, that was it. The game Sims recognised it, no problems whatsoever. As I say, I couldn't run the shifter plugged into it, but it did all recognise it, and you may be all right. Yours may not have any EMI, whereas mine did, so it's certainly worth trying. But yeah, this is all out-of-box experience, perfect, no problems at all. And that's one of the reasons I wanted to go to Fanatec, because they're an established company, they've been around a long time. The software, firmware has all matured over the last couple of years for this device, and I expected everything to work. I didn't want to have to jump through hoops to get, you know, my direct drive wheelbase to work, which you sometimes have to do with the, I'm going to say, how would you describe Fanatec versus some of the others? This is like a household brand. You know, they work on console as well as PC, and they're just a bit more sort of user-friendly, so to speak, than some of the other specific like PC sim racing hardware can be, where you have to use random bits of software to configure things, and not quite so plug and play. So this all worked really nicely. You know, even fitting this Podium Hub, you know, with my Sparco wheel just bolted on, and you just slide it on there. The quick release and everything all works just fine for me. I don't notice any flex or wobble when I'm driving, when I'm actually using it. Can I make the steering wheel flex if I grab it top and bottom and force it? Yes, of course I can. But if you go out to your car in real life and grab your steering wheel top and bottom, you can make that flex as well. There's no noticeable flex whilst using it. And in fact, I've done 2 video clips that I'll put up in a second where I demonstrate the cameras at the side, where I do a stage in Dirt Rally, and you'll be able to see whether there's any movement or flex in actual use, any visible flex. I don't feel any, but I haven't actually watched the video clips yet. We may see some in the videos, we may not, but I definitely don't feel any. The first clip is with this little locking screw fitted. Now that screws into here on this quick release, which no longer makes it a quick release because you've screwed it in. Now for me that's fine because I don't use different wheels anyway, I only use this wheel. So the first video is with this in, because someone in the comments on my last video said if you fit that, Carl, it gets rid of that tiny little bit of sort of play that's there. So I thought, oh right, yeah, I'll give it a go. I can't say I noticed a massive difference, but that's because I didn't really have any flex to speak of that I could feel in the first place. When you fit this Podium Hub, what you're supposed to do is you can see the collar, can't you? Yeah. Wind this collar up so it just nips this rubber piece here, rubber sleeve, and then you put your quick release, slide it on with your wheel, and then you nip that up again. Now for me, when I do that, there's no noticeable flex or play whilst driving anyway. But I put this locking screw in just because I can, because I don't change the wheel. And like I say, I didn't feel really any difference, but we'll have a look at those video clips and see whether there's any visible difference from the side. So in fact, I'm going to roll those clips now. So here's the first clip, and this is the one with that locking screw still engaged. You'll actually, if you look at the bottom right hand corner of the video frame, you'll see the aluminium profile upright wobbling every now and then from side to side when I steer aggressively. This is because my rig is on casters on carpet. So if I do aggressive steering like what I'm doing here, the force feedback's turned up to double what I would normally use for this test. So yes, the whole rig wobbles a little bit, but you might think, oh, that's terrible, Carl, it's a pain in the arse. It really isn't, because I'm in the rig and I'm wobbling with the rig, if you get what I mean. It's a bit like when you're sat in a car in real life and the car's moving on its suspension, you're moving with it. In my situation here, the carpet is my suspension, if you want to look at it that way. And so as the rig moves, my seat moves and I move with it. So you don't feel it when you drive. It's not a problem. When flex, you just see me take the little screw out there. So this is the same run again, but without that little locking screw in. Yeah, the flex that we don't want is when things move independently of our rig. So if my steering wheel was to be flopping around here, or the wheel deck was to be flopping about independently from the rig, that's obviously really bad. If the whole rig is moving, that would be like having a motion platform, so to speak, where your whole rig's moving around. So I get a little bit of sort of movement in the carpet is what you're seeing there. But looking at this video, I'm not seeing any flex in the steering wheel or the shaft or the quick release with the screw in or with the screw out. So it's all good. And like I said, I can't feel it anyway. And that's what's really important. So we've just had a look at those. At the time of recording this video, I'm yet to actually watch them myself. So you will either have just seen no flex, like with or without this in, or you might have seen some flex without it and now there's none with it. Or maybe there was flex all the time. I don't actually know because I haven't watched them. But again, what I say is, in practice, in actually using it, I don't notice any flex at all. And that is what's important. Whenever I review things, I try and make a point of doing things for how they're designed to be used, because that's what you want to be testing. Any one of us can can grab a steering wheel and bend the crap out of it. You know, we could put a big lever bar on something and go, oh look, it's really flexing. But that isn't, of course, what it's designed for. So these reviews that I do, it's about real life use and the experience you get, you know, using it. So that's what we'll have just seen in those video clips. So for me, it's fine. I've no issues whatsoever. Like I say, my only gripe is the tiny little power button on the back and the fact that my shifter has EMI problems, but that is a problem with the shifter and not a problem with the wheelbase. So that's really all the sort of physical hardware side of the review. The little screen on the top there is something I particularly like. You know, you can show torque output and you can adjust some settings and you can just have the Fanatec logo on there if you want. It's a nice little thing to have. But yeah, that's all. I think that's all the physical hardware we need to talk about. You know, this Podium Hub works just fine. I have, you know, no issues with that either. My Sparco wheel bolted to it and this goes on without any problem. Oh, the only other thing I will say actually is when you, let's just slacken that off for a minute. With a lot of direct drive wheels, here's the thing. With a lot of direct drive wheels, and this is no different, they stick out miles. Like, why is that so, I'm going to use the word unnecessarily long. Maybe it isn't unnecessarily long because of the way these motors are that have to be like that. But to me, it's like when I fit it on my rig, I'm like, I've got to try and move all my uprights and my wheel deck like 6 inches backwards because the steering wheel was going to be embedded in my chest otherwise. But again, this isn't exclusive to the DD1. This is most direct drive wheelbases. You know, I mean, in this case, you've got some electronics in this Podium Hub here, so you couldn't sort of shrink that down. And then, you know, the actual center of the motor sticks out a reasonable distance, but it just seems like it sticks out a long way to me. But yes, again, it's not really a gripe as such. It was just an observation. But yeah, so what's it like to use? Well, you know, I've already said I recommend it and I think it's great, so you know my answers are going to be good. It's so smooth compared to a belt driven or gear driven wheel, and this is what I noticed in my first impressions. It just flows, you know, and it feels so much more realistic because of that. You don't realise how unrealistic the sort of cogging that you feel on a belt driven wheel or gear driven wheel is, and how it detracts from the feeling of realism, which is super important to some sim racers. I mostly race for fun, so I don't mind too much. But you notice instantly, I mean, you can see it just you know, it just flows, it just rolls. There's no, and like I said in the first impression video, if I hold the wheel and with two fingers and very gently move it powered down, I can feel as it's passing by the magnets inside the motor there. And some people might describe that as cogging. It isn't cogging, it's just as it goes past each magnet, it gets pulled to the next one. But when you use it, or even just give it a tiny little bit of spin with your fingers, you know, it's perfectly smooth. So you don't feel any cogging or anything like that whatsoever. And that was probably the biggest thing for me. The force feedback, the actual strength of it, is obviously loads, 20 Newton meter peak. And in my opinion, that's more than any of us really need, because unless you're trying to simulate a car with no power steering, a very fast rack and massive wheels, you don't need more than 20 Newton meters of torque, as far as I'm concerned. Most of the cars we're driving or simulating will have some form of power steering, or the steering will be tuned and set up in such a fashion that it's relatively light and controllable. You know, I don't imagine, obviously I'm not a race driver, but I don't imagine race drivers want stupidly heavy steering, which you could have by turning this force feedback all the way up, you know, where the wheel is trying to pull itself out of your hands. You're not going to be able to drive with much finesse if you're battling with the steering wheel, you know, every time you come to a corner or a lump or bump or something. And as I say, certainly with power steering, it's very light in, you know, in pretty much all vehicles. So I don't run this anywhere near the 20 Newton meters that it can put out. It's just, you know, you can try it out for yourself. Just turn it up and put it all to maximum and just try. It's like, well, that isn't realistic. It's way too heavy. So more than enough power. Detail and responsiveness is another thing that people always talk about when you go from belt-driven wheels up to direct drive wheels. I would say there's definitely an increase in detail, because with a belt-driven wheel or a gear-driven wheel, there is a certain amount of dampening that goes on because of the gears and the belt having to, there's always a little bit of lash in them, a little bit of play, a little bit of movement. And so that will absorb small details, fine details, whereas you don't get that with this. But to be honest, there's not that much fine detail when we're racing to be lost. So whilst you do notice, and again, this is all really subjective, because depending on how you have your force feedback tuned, a lot of what people describe as detail, which is often suspension feedback and road feedback, you may not feel anyway because you haven't got your force feedback settings up particularly high for those parts. Maybe you don't like it. And other people may have them up really high and they feel you could run over a cigarette paper and the wheel would move, because you've got that, you've got that sort of setting amplified so high. So I would say the detail's there if you want it to be there, if you're the sort of person that has things turned up that high. But for me, I try and set things kind of as realistically as possible. And one of the things you'll notice in real life is that when you're going over lumps and bumps and potholes, and even if you hit a curb or drive a grassy bank in your day-to-day car, assuming it's something you don't value too much because you might damage it, you don't feel much through the steering wheel. The impact and everything else you feel in your bum, you feel it through your seat, through the chassis of the car. Because I actually went out in my work van and then an old Fiesta I had kicking about, and went smashing up grassy banks and up and down curbs at about 40 miles an hour to see whether the steering wheel in the van or the Fiesta actually moved when the wheels impacted with that curb or with that grassy bank. And it didn't, not even slightly. And it makes sense, because the way power steering is set up in a vehicle, it's power assisted steering. It assists your steering, it makes things easier for you. So you have to do very little input for the wheels to do what they're told, not the other way around. If you smack up a grassy bank or up and down a curb, like I was physically doing to test this out, the steering wheel doesn't do jack. You can hold it with one hand and it just stays exactly where it is. You get a hell of a lump and a whack through the chassis and through your bum, but the steering wheel doesn't pull you to one side or anything like that. So again, this is all very subjective about how you choose to set it up, because when we are, racing in simulators, we don't have that physical movement that we feel through our seat, through our bums. We only have our steering wheel as our form of sort of physical cues for the most part. So you may want those sort of effects exaggerated, where if you do hit a curb, the wheel jolts to one side, or a pothole, or you clip a grassy bank, you might want it to pull you that way, so you're getting that physical feedback, even though in real life it's not actually what happens, at least not in my testing in those two vehicles. But the detail's there if you want it, the power's there if you want it. I'm waffling on a little bit, aren't I? It's so smooth to use. Build quality's great. I don't get any noticeable flex in use. It fits just fine. The software was great and easy to use. The unboxing experience was good. Digitalmotorsports.com did me a great service and got it here super quick. I have no complaints about the Fanatec DD1 whatsoever. So if you're in the market for one, if you're considering it, if you're on the fence, if you're thinking maybe I should get a direct drive wheel, I can definitely recommend it. I like the fact that there's no wire dangling from the back of your steering wheel that plugs into your wheelbase like a lot of them have. And obviously for console users, Xbox and PlayStation, these are compatible if you get the appropriate versions. So there's that as well. And keeping things in the same ecosystem like me, I like having matching wheelbase, shifter and pedals. It's just nice. It looks nice on my rig, all sort of a symmetry for want of a better description. So yeah, it's all good. I think I've probably covered just about everything there is to cover. If there are any questions, feel free to stick them in the comments. As always, there's a lot to talk about with these. I'm just trying to make sure mentally that I haven't forgotten anything, because as always, I don't use a script. I do it all as I'm going along. But no, I think that's pretty much it. Yeah, well, lovely. Thank you very much for watching, and as always, take it easy.